1, 3, 2, 1.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، حمد عباده الشاكرين الذاكرين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Welcome to another night with I Left My Heart at the Masjid. Wonderful to be with all of you, and thank you for tuning in and being with us today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect you and your loved ones from the hardships that we are facing and all humanity. Allow us to be a source of benefit, inshallah, and ease to others. And lift these times of hardship, fill our hearts with gratitude, inshallah, and steadfastness, and make us, inshallah, at the end of it closer to Him and better people. Allahumma ameen. Inshallah, tonight, wanted to start with a centering reflection before, welcoming, alhamdulillah, our esteemed guest. Reflecting back to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as we look back at the seerah, in fact, an element of these times that we live are that we connect with our tradition, and particularly people that faced hardship, adversity, darkness, and difficulty in the past, and succeeded in facing it, overcame it. And in fact, ultimately, there was a great divine wisdom in why they went through that experience and the gains and the strength that they gained through it. Those were always elements of our tradition. They're always part of the Prophet ﷺ's personality, or the prophets in the Quran, or the righteous women and men of our tradition. But sometimes going through that experience allows us to look back through a different lens, whether that's the lens of people that have faced isolation and connected deeply with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether that's the lens of something that Allah has spared us much of in our times, the tests of plagues and disease and hardship that were much more widespread, and that so many of us have been spared from, in our lifetimes, and so many other lessons as we look back. One lesson that I want to reflect on with you today is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's impact and islah and reform on his society through action. To be honest, a lot of us, when we think about our relationship with others and our impact on society, sometimes we can be a little bit one-dimensional. We think about the da'wah and the invitation of sharing our religion and our way of life, which is a very important part of our role, an important part of our deen, especially in this world full of Islamophobia and full of prejudice, that people get an honest look at our identities and our faith. That can be done through speeches, that can be done through sharing brochures, that can be done through being a good neighbor and being a good, force in society and a contributor for common good. But the Prophet ﷺ had another way. A number of ahadith and a number of incidents in his life are narrated about how he was generally working for the common good. How, without asking for a price in return, or even acknowledgement, or sometimes not even sharing the religion explicitly, rather sharing it through his actions and through himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was always someone who was reforming the society around him and performing, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the tongue of another prophet in Al-Quran Al-Kareem, "In uridu illa al-islaha mastata'at." Indeed, I just wish to reform whatever I am able to. That according to my capacity and my ability, I want to be a force of good, inshallah, wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put. One of the very powerful examples of this comes in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a beautiful long story. I'm just indicating it briefly today, but inshallah to motivate you either to go back to the lectures we gave about it at IAR, or to research it yourself, or we can revisit it at a later session, inshallah. But this was something that happened when the Prophet ﷺ was quite young. As a young man in Mecca, a teenager, his people witnessed a very difficult time called Harbul Fijar or Harbul Fujjar, which means the war of the sacrilegious people, the indecent people. The reason it was called this was because the war claimed so many lives and the fighting was so widespread, was that it actually happened in front of the Kaaba, in the precincts of the Haram, which was, even with the pagan Arabs, something that was totally off limits and against their ways. And so it was a very unfortunate conflict that upset the social order. After it, the Prophet ﷺ, despite his young age, witnessed a very momentous occasion called Hilf al-Fudul, the league or the pact or the agreement of the virtuous. This was done after a man was not given the price for his goods from a chieftain of Mecca. In the norm of the time, the strong would oppress the weak, the rich would overtake the poor, and this would just be swept under the rug. But in fact, in a long and moving, story, this person calls out to the sense of justice and decency, and in fact, the claim to religion of the Arabs of the time. And from it comes this agreement where they agreed, in fact, until the end of time, that no one would be done wrong in Mecca from her people or from outside, except that they would stand with the oppressed against the oppressor, which was totally countercultural at the time, in a norm where usually you just stood with your own people regardless of who was on the other side. The Prophet ﷺ witnessed this as a young man, and decades later, as a prophet returning to Mecca after he had lived in Medina, he shared this story with a new generation of Sahaba that were not alive, a new generation of companions that had not witnessed these difficult times. And he says in the hadith, لَقَدْ شَهِدْتُ فِي دَارِ عَبْدِ اللَّهِ بْنِ جُدْعَانَ حِلْفًا مَا أُرِيدُ أَنَّ لِي بِهِ حُمْرَ النَّعَمِ, that I saw in this home, as he passes by the house of the oldest man of Mecca at the time, Abdullah ibn Jud'an. Obviously, he had passed long before the Prophet ﷺ passed by his house, now sharing the story with the later generation. He said, I saw an agreement in this house. I wouldn't trade it for a flock of red camels. It's like a flock of cars or the world and what is in it, an enormous fortune. And this was the worth of this honest commitment with others to work towards the common good and to work towards the reformation and betterment of society. There are many important causes, both within this crisis and beyond it, that are important causes that we should be concerned of, whether they affect Muslims or not. And indeed, there are many Muslims that are affected by this, but our concern is broader than this. Our concern is a broader good. When we talk about issues such as affordable housing, issues such as gun violence, issues such as education and all of the important policy and discussions that come around that, and so on and so forth, down to the concerns that affect us locally, from traffic to public works to access and so many other issues. We as Muslims should not only have a place at the table, but we should be at the forefront. Our religion should be showing in our common concern and advocacy for the common good and for the ethical and moral principles that offer, protection and opportunity for all, particularly those that often suffer at the hands of prejudice or wrongdoing or oppression or injustice. This is nothing new in our community. Many individuals have taken a huge role in this work and have accomplished very proud accomplishments in the past. But part of our introspection as a community is that this should not just be done at the level of individuals, but should be part of our culture and our habit as an institution, as a masjid. That this should be something that is regularly, something that we organize ourselves to do, something that we train ourselves to do, something that we build the discipline to do collectively, and the steadfastness that it is not reliant just on one person's shoulders. It's a lot of hard work, and it's a great deal more technical and more deliberate than many people often associate with our masajid or places of worship, but it is incredibly important work. And when you see the spark in someone's eye that is suffering from having an empty fridge and not having food on the table, despite working 2 and 3 jobs, when you see a person that is coming to get medical care and is excluded because of how they look or who they are compared to others, when you see someone that is being, priced out and pushed out of their homes and people don't even think about where they're going, and you see that you're there advocating and supporting and just making that person's life a little bit easier, then all of that hard work and all of that striving becomes more than worth it, just from that indication in dunya. And of course, the greatest gift is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would accept it. I regard this to be a forgotten sunnah and a sunnah that is not sufficiently practiced at our institutional levels. And I'm very proud of our team at IAR. More than 50 volunteers are part of the IAR Advocates Network that is working closely with One Wake, alhamdulillah, an organization of organizations linking many, alhamdulillah, nonprofits, Masjid, churches, synagogues, other organizations, in terms of working in these types of structures and working for the common good. And we're extremely fortunate today. And I want to truly appreciate and acknowledge, alhamdulillah, the presence of, alhamdulillah, Brother Abdul Shakoor Whitley, who recently moved from Brooklyn here to rejoin us in North Carolina. Alhamdulillah, he has extensive experience in the community organizing field, which is one of the incredibly important ways that we work in this area. We're very fortunate, alhamdulillah, to have him in our region and to have him giving up his time today, inshallah, to share with us a bit about his journey, a bit about his story, and a bit about this work, inshallah. And so, Brother Abdul Shakoor, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for giving us this time today and for educating us. I'll turn it over to my dear brother Kashif to give you a proper introduction, inshallah, and kick off the conversation to the next phase.
Shukran, barakallahu feekum.
Jazakallah khair, Imam AbuTaleb. I appreciate that. Starting it off today. Alhamdulillah, we did a nice role reversal. Normally I start off the videos and then you bring the main content. Today I'm in the hot seat, alhamdulillah. To answer a lot of the questions, we're also practicing social distancing. We're keeping 6 feet apart from each other. So alhamdulillah. So tonight, as Imam AbuTaleb mentioned, we're joined by our brother Abdul Shakoor Whitley. Brother Abdul Shakoor recently moved to North Carolina to assist in the One Wake initiative. And as Imam AbuTaleb mentioned, this is a congregation of congregations. And Brother Abdul Shakoor will talk more about the importance of this power building, of bringing together all these different organizations for the common good and how there's so much strength in numbers. But about Brother Abdul Shakoor in detail and exactly why we wanted to bring him on today. Brother Abdul Shakoor has by far one of the most amazing stories I've heard about finding Islam, about finding the path of Allah, finding the majesty of the religion and to understanding the Quran. And I thought that had to be shared with everyone. I would love to present you with a giant bio, and I've written one up, but I don't think any words I use would capture the true essence of it. So we're going to get straight from the source. Brother Abdul Shakoor, how are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you? How's the family doing?
Alhamdulillah, everybody's well.
Alhamdulillah. You know, I'm glad you guys are down here in North Carolina now. We don't usually went out to New York, but this is one rare occasion that, conditions here are just a little bit better. But inshallah, we pray for a smooth recovery up there.
Yeah.
For those good old Yankee boys.
Yeah, I appreciate it a lot more here in North Carolina right now than there.
Alhamdulillah. So, would you mind telling me a bit about yourself? So, how long ago did you move to Raleigh or to Durham, I believe?
So, in the beginning of the year, I moved here actually in December, but I didn't really get back here until January because I had to finish my job in Brooklyn.
Okay. And up in Brooklyn, what were you working on?
Well, as an organizer, I was working on criminal justice reform. So working with different organizations, we had about 40-something institutions there as well. And we were just trying to get back some equality, for individuals who are coming home from prison and those who are in prison and, getting some humanity back for those individuals because it's a system that's deep on stripping people of their humanity and also too just taking advantage of them. So we were trying to even the playing field basically.
That's incredible to hear. Now I'd love to hear more about this organization you were with in Brooklyn, but let's first unpack criminal justice reform, and what sparked an interest in working on that for you? Brother Shakoor?
Me to get into, yeah, me to want to get into criminal justice reform.
Yeah, what sparked a passion into working
Yeah.
in this field of criminal justice reform and working with those who the system has hurt so badly?
Okay, well, basically it goes back to my upbringing and my own struggles and strifes dealing with.
Inshallah, Brother Abdul Shakoor will be with us momentarily. We're having a small connection issue. Might join us just by audio only, inshallah. We'll see in a second.
You there?
I'm there. Alhamdulillah.
Okay. Yeah, so my whole life basically has been a life that I was impacted either directly or indirectly by the criminal justice system. And through time, I was able to find a way to make, be able to find a way to gain power to try to do some things to change the criminal justice system.
Alhamdulillah. So your upbringing was a bit rough. Tell me, rough upbringing to community organizer, community activist. What is the journey there? That sounds like a very interesting turn of events and very Obama-esque, if you don't mind me saying. But what led to it? What was the path down that from where you started to moving down to Raleigh? What were the key steps along that way?
No.
Brother Abdul Shakoor, I'm going to ask you to turn off the video.
Early years, my family is from. Turn it off.
Yes, please. Okay. Let's try
Is
again.
that better?
Just a touch better.
That's better?
That's much better, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so my family is from Wilson, North Carolina, and my mother pretty much left North Carolina as a young girl, uneducated, because she had to work in the farms. Her family were sharecroppers, so she got tired of the abuse with that and pretty much left at 17, no education, moved to North New Jersey, and she had me about 6 years later. And basically she was a person with, no job skills, struggled. And so we lived in a poor neighborhood. The poor neighborhood also had horrible school systems like many neighborhoods do, including Raleigh today in some senses. And so she sent me to a school outside my district. And I loved it. I was a nerd. I loved school, and I was a mama's boy. So, my days would be just go to school, do all my work, come home. And but at the age of 12, things started to change for me. I started getting bullied real bad at school because I wasn't from the neighborhood in which the school was in. And I was a nerd. I didn't have any social capital. Nobody there really knew me in a sense that I had people to be with me. And so I started getting jumped by guys who was older than me, 14, 15 years old, already in the streets. And that went on for my first year, actually. Not my first year, my whole 6th grade year of school. And after that year, I completed school. I missed like 46 days of class that year. But I still was able to pass because I always got excellent grades. And so came back for 7th grade year. It started again, and I pretty much dropped out of school in 7th grade. But I needed somewhere to be, so I started hanging with the crowd in my neighborhood who was hanging in the streets. And so I started hanging with guys who would steal cars and, got into that with them. And that led to me, having some run-ins with the law, but also to it got to from neighborhoods very violent. And the guy about 13 at the time, he was about 18. And he forced me basically to learn how to fight, because to him, that was the only way to stop me from being bullied so bad. So he forced me to learn how to fight. And shortly thereafter, I ended up having a fight with a guy, and I hurt him pretty bad in my neighborhood. And it was actually out of fear, because he said he was going to get his cousin and they were going to come back and jump me. And so after that fight, I realized people started treating me differently. All of a sudden, people started giving me respect. They stopped calling me punk and stuff like that. And so I realized that if I be violent, that was a way to actually change my identity, that way people saw me, but also too, another way of protecting myself by being on the offense instead of the defense, so to say. And so hanging in the streets more after that, started selling drugs, and did that for a while. And by age 25, I pretty much ended up going to prison. Got sentenced to do 24 years in prison, in which I did 21 years off of, 20 years and 4 months. Actually just came, while I was in prison, it turned out to be a good thing, because my first few months in prison, I ended up in my cell one day, and he was Muslim. I used to watch them pray, and he asked me, are you interested in becoming Muslim? And I told him no, because I grew up in the Nation of Islam, and to me, I didn't believe in it, because it was false teachings, and I knew it. So he said, no, this is not that. And then he brought me the Quran. He started talking to me about, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He brought me some Sirah, a couple of hadith books, and I started just studying the religion. And it just was so clear to me that this was the haq, it was the truth. And so I took my shahada the first few months I was inside county jail waiting to go to prison. And it turned out to be the best thing that happened in my life. Going to prison for 20
years. That's incredible, man.
Yes, going to prison for 20 years was absolutely worth, becoming Muslim and hopefully dying in a way that's pleasing, living a life that's pleasing to my Lord. While inside too, I was able to meet a lot of good men, a lot of role models. I tell people that Islam breeds men. And it was the first time in my life that I was able to be around men. You meet a lot of males in the neighborhood, but nobody was men. And so they were men who held me accountable in terms of what I was doing, in terms of my studies in Islam, but also to me getting back acclimated with education. And so, I went and hurry up and got my GED while I was in prison. And then in 2013, they came with a college program, and I was able to acquire my associate's degree while inside prison. And from there, while I was in a halfway house, I was able to go to Rutgers University and get my bachelor's in criminal justice reform. In criminal justice. I graduated at the top of my class, gained a ton of social capital. So how I got into organizing was one of my professors inside the prison. He knew a lot about me because, he was in there with me often, and he knew of me organizing, although I didn't call it organizing. I knew it to be organized inside of the prison. And so he asked me, what did I need help with? And I told him I needed a job. And he pretty much reached out to the individual who was in charge of Metro IF, which is the organization that One Wake and about 70 other institutions are a part of across the country. And he came to meet me and asked me, we just sat down and had a conversation. His name was Mike Geek, and we sat down and had a conversation about my life, about what I thought about politics, about, people in power. And within 30 minutes of that meeting, he pretty much said, I want to work with you. You get a job for you. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me because it doesn't come from me. Everything, comes from Allah that is good for me. And so Allah blessed me to have a job lined up even before I stepped out of the prison totally. And from there, I went straight to working in Brooklyn for East Brooklyn congregations as an organizer. And so that's how I pretty much got into organizing. So that's just the background of how I got started with organizing and got into organizing.
That's awesome. Jazakallah khair for sharing this wonderful story with me. I've always heard that Islam was the fastest growing faith within the correctional system. And I never as bad as it sounds, never met someone that learned about Islam through their journey in the correctional system. So that's, subhanAllah, that's amazing to hear. And to hear just how your viewpoint changed, from the nation to now more Sunni mainstream Islam, it's exciting as well to understand that journey and that path that you took.
No.
So community organizing, it's, we're hearing from rough upbringing to community organizing. We got Obama in there. We're on the streets, had to fight to survive, had to fight back when the boys were there. We got some Muhammad Ali in there. I'm looking for a third role model out here. But community organizing, what are the virtues there? Why is it so important for us? And for our viewers at home during this tough time, we have the coronavirus outbreak. What is so important about community organizing that they could maybe implement into their lives?
The most important thing about it's two things. Organizing is very important because it's a way to build. It's all about building power. A lot of times we think of power as something negative, but there's two types of power. There's power over. That's like usually government when they, enforce laws on us or, indecent things. But then there's power with, and that's what we work to build power with. You think about what the Imam was saying, when Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he was going through all his trials and tribulations early on. The Muslims didn't come strong yet until they got to build power with one another. After they wanted other things. So it isn't to have to build power, to come together. And unfortunately, in this day and time, as big as the Masjid is, as big as a lot of these churches are that we work with, one entity can't do so. So we must come together collectively to build power, to hold people accountable who are in power. The other thing I could say, the reason, the principle that's very important about organizing is it gives you a chance, as the Imam spoke about earlier, to do something, whether it's for yourself or for others. Oftentimes we see things and we talk about them, but it's about, as the Imam said, taking action. And so that's what organizing is about. It's about putting forth action. I think about the hadith where, the hadith where and what camel had up. And he said to him, come and call it, why didn't you tie your camel? And he said, because I rely on Allah. And Allah's messenger said, come and call it that. Tie your camel, but rely on Allah. And so we have to do the work. Yes, Allah can take care of this world and everything in it, but we have to do the work that it takes to get things done. Allah has blessed us in certain manners to be able to do so.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's very poignant what you said about doing something and taking action. And as well as comparing it to the example of tawakkul, tie your camel and then put your faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can't just put our faith without doing some work. As well as building power. Alhamdulillah, I sat in on one of your the workshops that One Wake put on in Raleigh, and I was amazed to learn of just how important power is and how it can be used for good. Especially, growing up, we always see power as the man, someone coming at us to take away something from us, maybe force us to stay home when I want to be out there enjoying the beautiful weather. But there is
Yes.
power in this. So when you were up in Brooklyn, can you tell me a story about maybe when you guys built power or you saw something and you took action about it? You tied your camel?
Absolutely. So first, the reason that I chose to work in Brooklyn, because I could have worked in Jersey, would have been easier for me, but I chose to go to Brooklyn because I went there and I saw what they were able to do with power, the things they were able to get built. And so the organization in Brooklyn, they built over 6,000 affordable housings and apartments by building power. They built a couple of schools and communities, parks, everything. They did a lot of things in the neighborhood. in East New York to bring the city, to make the city more beneficial and livable for individuals. But one thing that I saw specifically that I took part in, as soon as I got there, 2 years prior, they had went to, well, about 7 leaders from East Brooklyn Congregation, the organization that was up there, went to Mayor de Blasio and they asked him for $500 million for affordable housing for senior citizens. And Mayor de Blasio said, you know, okay, sure, no problem. But nothing happened over 2 years. And so they went back to him, the same 7 to 9 leaders, and said, hey, what happened? You said you were going to put $500 million for affordable housing. And Mayor de Blasio looked him in the face and said, I never said that to you. And so they brought forth the transcripts and said, no, it's right here. You did say it. And he said, oh yeah, that. Oh, yeah, I don't know where the money is for that. And basically he was just brushing them off saying, you know, it's 7 of you guys. I don't care how, you know, yeah, you have churches, but it's only 7 of you guys. Like, what am I worried about? And so we organized and put together, you talk about action, we put together 6,000 people on City Hall steps in the pouring rain. Then we put together 1,500 people in front of Gracie Mansion, in front of the mayor's mansion, and basically brought awareness to him not doing what he said he was going to do, holding him accountable. And long story short, within a couple of months, we had the mayor chasing behind us to want to have a conversation with us. And it led to him basically putting that 500 million back, but also to putting a plan in motion with dates that things will be getting, the ground will be broken and buildings will be built for senior citizens with affordable housing. And that's just what you can do by putting together action, but it takes a large amount of us to come together to do so.
SubhanAllah, that's an excellent point, that there's power in numbers and you can make something happen, and there's a lot of power in speech, but there's a lot more power in action and going out there and getting what you want done. SubhanAllah, that's amazing that they got built. What's the story with those congregations now? Was the affordable housing built? Is it fully at capacity? Do they have a lot of people living there?
So the ones for the senior citizens, that's in construction now. However, they've been building affordable housing. I said over 6,000 because of coming together in action have been put together in New York. The first one started actually in the early 80s, and those houses went in Brooklyn for about $30,000 to $40,000 back then. And right now, those homes are worth anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000, and they're paid for. So these individuals who were poor people, lower class working people, have been able to obtain generational wealth through home ownership. And that came from, again, not only those people who wanted homes, standing up and doing something, but people who just said it's not right for those who may have had a poor hand to start and deal with to be behind. And so it's about everybody coming together, whether it benefits you or not. And it's a beautiful community there now. Not only did they build affordable homes, what I like about it is that all the elements that are usually in affluent neighborhoods are in those homes, in those neighborhoods. There's no crime, there's no vagrancy, there's no, cars being left unattended and dirt. People are treated like human beings in those communities because the organization has organized the homeowners so that they can, tell whatever problems and issues they have, so they can hold the people in power accountable to make sure they get what they're supposed to have.
SubhanAllah, that's incredible to hear as well, that they're giving the power back to the homeowners to make their own decisions and not just letting them go free, more so giving them some structure and some guidance that they want to uplift themselves, not just financially, but socially as well. SubhanAllah, that's truly wonderful to hear, alhamdulillah. You mentioned houses in Brooklyn are between 500,000 and 3 million. I wonder, how many, is it a closet-sized house you guys have up in New York, or do you guys get actual houses up there?
So the houses that they built, they're actually houses, but they're small. They're small. They don't have any backyards. Their houses are actually connected. It's not like North Carolina. One of the things that definitely made me want to move to North Carolina was like I said, my family is from North Carolina, so I know the beauty of being able to have a backyard, to being able to have some space to play around in. Unfortunately, those things are not there. But without all of that, the homes are, appreciating in value tremendously. So it's working.
Alhamdulillah, you beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you what you're doing in North Carolina now. So what are your future goals for the Wake County sponsors, or One Wake as we call it now? What do you
Right.
see as the future of this organization? How can we help you out? What is the next step?
Yeah. So One Wake, to give people who don't actually know a lot about it, as the Imam was speaking earlier, we're organization of faith-based groups or institutions, nonprofit organizations, and such. And we have right now about close to 40 different institutions who are part of One Wake. So you're talking about tens of thousands of people who are actually coming together and being members of One Wake through their institutions. And that's a lot of power. And so what we're trying to do now is organize that power, because it's one thing to have members, but you have to be organized in order to be able to put things into action, in order for people to be able to see that we are together. And so the first thing that we try to do as organizers is we try to build relationships with people, with our members, with the laymen, with the leaders, but we also look for leaders. That's very important. And so the thing that I've been doing and we've been doing right now, because we're such a new organization, is trying to find who are those leaders that can put us in a room with anywhere from 20 to 50, 100 people and sit down and teach them about organizing. So it's important to teach what organizing is, what it can do, have certain workshops, have listening sessions, and just learn what the people would like to do, to work on, how they like to use this power to better their communities. And so we need to find out, how can we let's speak specifically about IAR. We need to be able to get individuals to where we can have some trainings about organizing, where we can sit down and start working together on issues and find out what resources do we have in people, who may be good with research, who may be good with, whether it's the people they know, or how can we just build power to start changing things, change our and it's going to, it usually looks like a bunch of meetings, sometimes one-on-ones, and also too, then, like I said, what we call listening sessions, where we get people in a room. Right now, it might be over Zoom. You may get 20 to 50 people on Zoom and just break in the room, first have a training, and then break in the rooms and discuss, organize, and then what we can do, and find out what people want to do. What do they want to work on? What angers them about their community?
Oh, that sounds amazing. For our audience at home, I'm just going to share the One Wake website so we can get you looking at something as well, inshallah. There are actually, to Brother Abdul Shakoor's points, One Wake is organizing these jobs team meetings. So it's like a Zoom meeting to discuss everyone that's maybe lost their job due to the pandemic and the growing threat of a deep recession. There's also some information about just all the different ways of bringing the fight and real change to our communities. So subhanAllah, if you want to get some more information about One Wake and their information, the website is onewake.org. SubhanAllah, Brother Abdul Shakoor, I really appreciate what you've mentioned about this point. And I think it goes back to what we started off with, what Imam AbuTaleb mentioned. The kind of idea that the pure intention of taking care of others, and especially in this time where some of us might have, a few more blessings than our neighbors. We might have the fortune of working from home and organizing from home, while we have first responders, doctors, medical personnel, grocery store clerks, all out there that don't have the flexibility, don't have the capabilities as their essential personnel, it teaches us the importance that maybe we can build this power together and say, we need to get the PPEs, the personal protective equipments for all these individuals. So I think there is no better time right now for our audience to get involved than right now during this crisis, especially when we're all at home. It's a wonderful opportunity to get motivated and to give back and say subhanAllah for all our blessings. I'm going to turn it back to Brother Abdul Shakoor. If you have any last minute thoughts, if I cut you off anywhere, if you want to share anything else, maybe tell me a bit more about power. I'd love to hear all about this.
Okay, so first of
Tell me
all,
a story about more of the congregational power building you guys have done. I think that's truly astounding to hear of how you guys have put together these diversified organizations into one common congregation of congregations.
yes. So, I mean, the beautiful thing is, like you said, you have, and to me, it needs to be that way where it's not just one entity. It's not just Muslims. It's not just Christians. It's not just, a certain ethnicity or color, whatever you want to call it, race, socioeconomical class. It's institutions. It's an institution of institutions filled with people of all dynamics. And that's scary to a lot of people with power, because now all of a sudden you have the masses coming together, so to say, from different walks of life. One thing that's important to me, and I spoke to the Imam about when I first came here, and the joy. So before I came here to North Carolina, I heard from other organizers who had already came and visited North Carolina for a training about the Masjid, about IAR. And, I heard some beautiful things. They talked about the Imam. They talked about how big the Masjid and how, the people, just they said great things about IAR. And my thing was, I couldn't wait to get here to work with IAR, because unfortunately, when I was in Brooklyn, it was just about all churches. And not that that's a horrible thing, but to be able to work in a space where you're seeing institutions have power and gain power, but you're not seeing that for the Muslims, the people who you love, for the sake of Allah. It was frustrating to me. I couldn't understand why the Muslims weren't getting involved in it, to the extent there in Brooklyn. And I just felt like we were missing out on something. So one of the churches that I was working with there, it was a big church, kind of like the Masjid is a big Masjid. And this church was, as the Imam said, it's important for us to be the forerunners of this thing. This church and its pastor, they were the forerunners of that congregation, of that institutions that we were working with. And so they had gained a ton of power for that church too. And that's what we can do with IAR. We can gain a ton of power within the organization, but also too for IAR, because you don't just organize to help others, but also too, in doing that and helping others, you help yourself, because you become an entity that is looked at as powerful. You get your name out there more, and people start understanding of power. Oh, IR, that's the institution that's with one week, their imam or the people, and they start seeing and thinking about these things. And the more power we build, the more we put ourselves out there, the easier it will be to get those people of power in a room to respect us enough to say, whatever you guys want, we want to work with you. We want to, we want to keep the peace with you, because they understand that we have the power to disrupt some things. And to me, that's what's very important. And so, as the Imam was saying, in order for us to be the forerunners of this one-way thing, we have to start putting that work together. The Imam spoke about 50 leaders in IAR, but we need a ton more. So I would like for that number to be around 250 people actively having conversations and wanting to come to meetings from IAR. And so when it comes time to mobilize, we can mobilize in great numbers, because that's how you are seen as a powerful entity. And so for me, that was one of the things that I was thinking about that's very important, that we start working towards building power in the sense of not just with One Wake, but how do we look as a member of One Wake and the power as a powerhouse in One Wake.
So I think that's an excellent point of putting it. It's not just about One Wake being a powerful organization of organizations, but of us as IAR congregants. Our viewers watching us today, IAR congregants, of making sure that we are a powerful organization within. So what would be a specific action item that we can take right now while we're all quarantined to assisting these efforts of building the power both within the masjid and then within One Wake?
So I think the first thing would be for us to start, people to come forth, first of all. Come forth and say, I want to be a part of this. How can I work? What can I do to work with IAR, to work with One Wake? And so, if that means that these individuals, reach out to you, the imam, other leaders who are working with One Wake, and we put together a list of individuals, we can start having conversations in which maybe I can reach out to them and we can have conversations, whether it's one-on-one or in small groups, and then have larger meetings, maybe via Zoom, where I could do a training on organizing more in depth, more about power, more in depth, about action and things of this nature. But and there's small things we're doing right now. One of the things we're working on right now is, like you said, we're working on the education, we're working on jobs. And right now we're trying to work more towards how is communities being affected and institutions and people being affected by this COVID-19 thing right now. And so that's where we're at the moment, trying to figure out what can we do with that.
Brother Abdul Shakoor, we're truly honored to have you with us tonight. I've been listening here in the background and really benefit a lot from what you had to share, as I'm sure all of our congregants did. We do appreciate your time. I have a full schedule. Appreciate, alhamdulillah, that yourself and the colleagues and our partners at One Wake also, despite the circumstance, or from those that are still working on the front lines, like you mentioned, alhamdulillah, and our congregants can check the link on the chat window, that among a number of initiatives ensuring that these institutions and our houses of worship and masajid stay strong, there's already a lot of efforts, especially focused on the impact on people, particularly those that have lost their jobs and the other impacts. And so it's comforting to know in these difficult times, alhamdulillah, that we're not alone and working alongside others, inshallah, to make sure to be there for one another. So we're looking forward, inshallah, to continue to work together. We're really happy to have you here with us in North Carolina. And inshallah, sooner rather than later, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with reuniting in our beloved masjid, inshallah, for the salah and for being able to gather there. Inshallah, we'll close tonight with dua. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us, inshallah, sources of khair and reform and betterment for ourselves, for our families, for our neighbors, for our communities. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to strengthen our masajid, to strengthen our institutions, to strengthen us with the discipline and the capacity and the power, inshallah, to be agents for positive change. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us stand forth for justice as witnesses to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our hearts firm and not waver, inshallah, on the path of working for justice and equality and opportunity for all people. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the courage and the ability and the sincerity to volunteer, inshallah, despite the difficulty, to volunteer with our time, to volunteer with our strength, to volunteer with our resources, with our finances, and to give back, alhamdulillah, of the good and the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We ask Allah to strengthen us as a congregation, to strengthen us as brothers and sisters, to strengthen us, inshallah, with our communities and our neighbors. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم تب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك Jazakumullah khairan. Wonderful to be with all of you today. Inshallah, tomorrow we're looking forward to welcoming you again for another episode, same time, same place. We will inshallah be talking about the completion of the hadith from the Shama'il, talking about the gatherings and the service of the Prophet ﷺ to others. Looking forward to seeing you there. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.